everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 47 of Monster. And yeah, Patreon's caught up with me now. I was ahead. I was doing great. I was ahead of the game, and then I went on a trip this last weekend, and now I've just caught up with episode 46 comments and episode 45 comments on YouTube. So we're all caught up now. And I'm going on another trip this weekend because of work, so I definitely am going to be able to catch up with comments for this episode and episode 46 before I start episode 48. So we're all on the same page now. Isn't that great? But man, Grimmer. We found out about Grimmer that he was a child that was at Kinderheim 511, that this has been going on for quite some time, and that he's grown up and is now a functioning adult who is basically a product of Kinderheim 511. And so his connection with Johan is very interesting. It makes a lot more sense now while Johan has spared him alongside Sook. And as they try to discover the truth, it's interesting because they're trying to discover truths about Johan. And CR kind of brought this up in their comment, the idea that Johan may not know some of these secrets either. Like in the tape, he was drugged as a kid, but there's a good chance that Johan wants to know this information as well. He may not even know all about himself. So that kind of changes things up a little bit, that Johan, although I will say Johan's been around for a while and he's known about his past for a while with Kinderheim, why he's not pursued it up until this point, and maybe he has, he just hasn't made headway, is a big question. So I'm still asking about that, but I do have some comments I want to go over before we start this episode. Koala777 talked about how Grimmer tells Sook that he's a journalist, which was the episode 45 missing subtitles. Several of you offered those subtitles for me, so thank you so much. Koala777 just beat y'all to it, so they get credit. But several people, HBanana7, some other people, they all, Moon in the Discord, they were all commenting about what those subtitles mean. Wasn't anything crazy, but let me tell you, it did make me, I can't look anything up on Monster because it will lead to a spoiler, so I was just sitting there going, I hope somebody tells me what was said so I can sleep at night. And you did, so thank you. I was able to sleep calmly because you told me that missing information. Appreciate it. Sasha notes that young Johan is actually voiced by 11-year-old Umewa Yudo. I was like, oh my god, he is the voice now for Atsushi, for Thorfinn, as well as Minato from Tsurune. He is actually voicing like these major characters on series that I've watched on this channel, but as an 11-year-old, he voiced young Johan, which is like one of his first voice acting roles. I'm just like, I was floored. I was like, oh my god, it does such a good job, like an 11-year-old. I know the dub voice actor, the English dub voice actor for Alphonse Elric was a young voice actor at the time voicing him, and now he's a voice actor. So I'm like, that's kind of cool to see kids be voice actors and then growing up to be voice actors as well. Very neat. And also the characters that, you know, Yudo plays now compared to young Johan is really interesting. But that's so cool. I love it. It's also the first time we hear young Johan's voice. It took us 45 episodes to get there, but here we are. So yes, the alcohol brands. Apparently, Sasha also noted that in Europe and over in Eastern Europe, it's pretty common to have alcohol brands on a lot of marketing, even just in random public spaces. I'm not so used to that. Like when you go to a bar or a restaurant, you kind of see them everywhere sometimes. Usually it's bars though, it's not actual restaurants. But I guess this was kind of in the area of a cafe, so it would make sense it was on the umbrellas. It was just interesting. And it's just so weird in an anime to see, you know, Budweiser is an American company. So seeing it like in Prague, you know, in this anime is like, this is like 3 levels of weird. It's just very interesting. HBanana7 noted the 3 frogs and kind of the meaning behind that sign. I loved this concept that the 3 frogs, the meaning has been lost, but the name remains. I was like, that's like the whole theory of the whole thesis of the show. The name is so important. We may forget the history of it. We may forget all the specifics, but the name carries power and it remains. Which is interesting because Johan doesn't want to exist anymore, supposedly. Johan wants to erase his name from existence. And it's actually like kind of that comment kind of became a turning point for me reading that, because I'm like, well, yeah, Johan's name, he's the monster, and everybody's trying to spread the name of Johan. Tenma and the others are spreading the name of Johan as Johan is actively trying to erase it. So I'm like, is Johan just trying to erase all traces to him and just fade away and not be remembered? And everybody's actively going against that? What do we do about that? So moving forward from this episode, that is something that's going to be kind of pinned in the back of my head, being like, okay, what does Johan's actions say versus everyone else's actions in making him known? So there's that. Moon commented in the manga. We had a big old discussion because in the manga, in the English translation, it is down there on the shelf, right where I'm pointing to. There is in volume 5, the panel of Nina, and she says, kill me. And Moon was like, I don't think that's right. I think it's just kill. And I was like, well, that changes the context, because it just says kill. We don't know who that's directed to. It's just a verb. And so they looked up the original Japanese manga panel, and it just says kill. And I'm like, English translators. So translation is always a weird thing. It's hard no matter if you're an official publishing company or a fan translator. It's just difficult because, especially with a language like Japanese, there are certain words that have a Japanese context that do not have an English context, and that's hard to translate. And so apparently there is no kill me, it's just kill. We don't have any specifics. So that does change the way I think about that scene. It's just very frustrating to know that it's in an official English copy that people that don't have others that can help research and analyze that won't know. So it may change their understanding of the scene, but what can we do? And then finally, H-7 commented with episode 45, the idea of not only Grimmer drinking just orange juice, which to me, now that we know Grimmer is a product of Kinderheim 5511, it's like, does Grimmer not drink alcohol because he knows that can lead to a trigger of him becoming Steiner the Magnificent? Does he not want to avoid that so he doesn't drink? Does he know that that affects his mood? It would make sense that someone that is a product of a mind alteration experimental brainwashing camp would probably want to avoid things that would alter his mind, like drugs and alcohol. Would make total sense. But also the idea that H. Banana talks about him hoarding. He has that duffel bag full of books. He's just hoarding books, clues, ideas. And to me, that ties back to Grimmer's entire identity. He doesn't remember a lot of his childhood. He's just grasping at straws of what he can remember. So it makes sense that he has this mechanism where he just like hoards books, and he hoards knowledge because he himself has been void and denied knowledge most of his childhood. So it all makes sense. I'm like, no, that's totally makes sense. I love that concept. And finally, Little Dude just noted that the concept of Johan eating is weird. And they were like, I can't imagine Johan in his gentle voice going up to like a sub sandwich shop and ordering, I would like the gyro with extra taniki sauce. I was like, yes, I want the artisan bread with pepperoni, no tomato. That is a funny concept. I'm like trying to hear like Johan order a sub sandwich alongside Nanami from Jujutsu Kaisen. I need it in my life. And also the idea that they said the manga is showing up more and more where they see it. I'm like, yes, I feel that the other show by the mangaka Pluto is about to air on Netflix. And so I feel like it's kind of like promoting the author. It's like when you see a show come out for a famous author and they start promoting their other works in addition to kind of like feed on the bandwagon. I feel like with Pluto coming out this fall, that they're trying to also promote Monster too. And Monster just getting on Netflix, I feel like that could be a resurgence in the manga getting published, which I'm glad, because the manga, I've got 5 volumes out of the 9 so far, and it's gorgeous. I love it. It's beautiful. So I highly encourage y'all to get the manga if you can. They are a little pricey. It's kind of a as you go sort of thing, but they are worth it. I really like them. So yeah, those are my comments. I'm really excited, y'all. I've almost talked for 10 minutes, so we're not going to waste any more time, but I'm really excited for Monster. I hope you all are too, but it's been a good week since I've watched the last episode, and I'm ready to see what's going to happen. So with that being said, we are going to start Monster episode 47, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Huh. Oh my God. Well, I mean, one thing that Monster does does that really surprises me is I was going into this series around the time we were at like episode 27, 28, we were getting into the library. I was like, and we were building up to find Johan and catching up to him and Tenma confronting him. I was like, we're like at a third of the way through the story. How are we going to make it to episode 74? And yeah, this series, like just introducing Grimmer, introducing Sook, and it's just like the web gets bigger and bigger, and the story gets more and more intricate, and things get more and more elaborate, and there's just more to it. And this series just shows how you can take a seemingly simple concept and just expanding upon it in so many ways. Like, we are now getting into, I feel like at this point of the story, right, we should probably talk about the four, we've done it before, but like the 4-act structure in a lot of Japanese narratives. In a lot of Western narratives, it's 3 acts, but in Japan they describe 4 acts, right? And so, again, I need to borrow a calculator because I'm not a math major, and who does math? So if we have 74 episodes or 75 episodes, and we divide it by 4, that's like 18 and a half episodes. So around episodes 1 through 19 is basically your act 1, where you introduce the characters and the initial conflict, right? You have the initial conflict and the characters. And in the second act, which in this case, if we're doing, let's say 19 plus that, of this, let's say 20 to 37, or 38 in this case, this is technically act 2, where the conflict gets going, right? And that's essentially what happens. We ended act 2 with examining everything about Johan and getting it all built up to their confrontation in the library. That all checks out, right? So we're in the midst of act 3, right? Which act 3 is essentially episodes, I'm going to do episodes, let's say 39 plus that. So essentially episodes 39 through 57, we're going to say, is act 3. And then that plus, would leave us with episodes 58 through 74 is act 4. So if we're going by that logic, then act 3 is what we call the twist. The twist in the story, the peripete, or however you want to say it. My accents are not great, so however you want to say it in French. But this is kind of the twist. The twist and the reveals are going to happen through episodes 39 through 57, which, yes, that's what's happening right now. We've got the twist of Grimmer's involvement, Sook's involvement, Kinderheim 511, learning about Johan in Prague, learning about his family, and it seems like we're about to get into some serious stuff, revealing the whole thing with Kinderheim, the whole thing about this man at the Rose Mansion, what the fudge, and all of this going on. So it seems like that twist is episodes 39 through 57 is the area of the twist. And then we have our climax and resolution in episodes 58 through 74. So far, Monster is following the 4-act structure very well. Like, I think that it's following it to a T. And that's awesome. I'm all for it. I think that you can, a lot of people expect stories to like go against the grain and be original. I think you can follow a traditional story structure and still find ways to make it engaging and amazing like Monster's doing. So we're in the heart of the reveal and the twist, right? There's been so many twists, so many reveals. It's been great so far. But I'm very intrigued to know what all we're going to find out. Like, we're introducing new characters on top of new characters. We're getting characters involved with one another. This episode was very satisfying. It was satisfying, but it was also disturbing. So we're tying a lot into the OP now. I've been wondering when we're going to get that damn glass of wine, and finally the glass of wine shows up that's been in that OP since episode 1. I was like, when are we going to get to that glass of wine? And then the sketches of the kids, we're going to tie back to that. That creepy image of Nina as a little girl is on one of those manga volumes. I'm glad we're getting to that. Like, we're tying into a lot of things that I've been waiting to tie into this entire time. And I knew I didn't want to bring up the glass of wine. I'm like, we're going to get to it eventually. But a lot of the OP imagery is now showing up in the episode, and it's so satisfying to say, there it is. Good. I've been waiting for this. But yeah, so I'm going to bring Whiteboard Coon a little bit forward. There we go. We can talk about this episode. So, concerns. we're going to put concerns over here. And then we're going to put a new plot developments over here, right? New plot developments over here, and talk about each of these as we go. My primary concern is about Nina and Anna being confused. That is probably my biggest concern, because Nina is in Prague with Dieter, and of course my anxiety for Dieter will be through the roof the entire time he is there, because he's a literal child and I want him to be safe. But yeah, obviously my concern, I'm just gonna put Dieter in big letters here. You all know that I am very concerned about, you know, Dieter's well-being. Nina and Anna being confused. I think that that's a big concern for me, because, and I'll do it in a different color, here's where our knowledge train is going. Tenma knows about Nina and Johan, right, being different. Grimmer is kind of on the outside. He knows of the name Johan. He doesn't know who he is. He knows about Anna, but he doesn't know about Nina, and he also knows about Dieter. But Grimmer doesn't know about any of them. He just knows about Anna, who is essentially Johan, right? So my fear is that if Johan finds out that Nina is in Prague, which would be very easy for him to do, because all the people that tried to talk to her and she ran past, all that has to happen with Johan is that he walks the street as Anna, and like the old woman confronts him and is like, hey, why didn't you talk to me the other day? And Johan's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, well, you were running really fast and it was a girl that looked just like you and she was running really fast by you. Johan's not an idiot. He's going to piece together that Nina's in Prague. And he's going to be like, oh, she's here. And I'm like, no! I was like, no. And it's not really even the fact, what's so crazy is at the beginning of this series, I was most worried about Johan and Nina getting together, because I was really worried about like some nefarious things that Johan had planned. This is the weirdest thing to say. I don't feel like Johan is a secret good guy or anything. Nothing like that. I feel like he's committed some major crimes, but I don't get the sense anymore that Johan is trying to take over the world or trying to do any of this bad, like, overall dastardly things like what I expected him to be doing. Instead, what it seems to be happening is that in this twist and reveal arc that we're in, if the twist is that Johan is just trying to learn about himself and then erase himself from existence so people can't use him, if it turns out that Johan is trying to like erase everything and has the same goals as Grimmer, then that's going to be really interesting. And we're going to talk about things like the plot developments and concerns. I guess a concern would be too is if Grimmer encounters Johan and what that relationship does with Tenma. Because right now I really like Grimmer and Tenma together as a duo. I think they work really well together. And Grimmer kind of is a good Tenma is a lot like Sook. So Grimmer working with Tenma is a lot like him working with Sook. The dynamics are very similar. But I think that Grimmer has a lot in common with Johan. And the fact that Tenma hasn't put that together is a little concerning for me, because Tenma is like dead set, I'm going to kill Johan. Grimmer doesn't seem to want to kill anybody. It just happens because it's self-defense and it has to happen in the moment. But Grimmer's like, my goal isn't really to kill anybody. I'm just trying to learn the truth and uncover the things that have to do with my past that I know. Grimmer and Johan have a lot of the same goals, to me it seems at this point. It's just the fact of how they do them. So you have Grimmer, who as a product of Kinderheim became a spy, became a journalist, and has been using that means of his career to gain information, right? And then you have Johan, who was not a spy, was not a journalist. He was a little kid who killed his foster parents and had a Steiner moment. So then it's like, well, how does he get information? Well, the only thing Johan seems to know how to do is he gets in contact with the underworld. And I've been thinking it was like, all along I was thinking of it was like psychic powers or things like that. But now I'm kind of thinking that maybe what it is instead of psychic powers is the fact that he knows the art of manipulation and brainwashing the same way that was used on him. So he, using the skills that he knows, which is how to manipulate and brainwash people, is able to get inside the minds of criminals and get them onto his side, right? And that's what's leading him to do that, to find information. Now, is that good? No. But what's interesting is it seems like both Grimmer and Johan are employing, they're after the same goal, and that is to learn about their past that they can't remember, try to find information about themselves. The only thing is Johan's taking it a step further in that he wants to erase that information after he finds it. He wants to do like the spy thing where you find the tape, you read the message, and then you destroy the tape afterwards. He wants to learn the information and then discard it and erase it from existence, whereas Grimmer seems to want to hold on to that information and keep it in case if he needs it. So it's just fascinating to me how similar Grimmer and Johan are. Their personalities are polar opposite. Grimmer's personality and Johan's, they go about it a completely different way. I definitely gravitate more towards Grimmer, who's a warmer character, even if it's a facade, is a warmer character, because Johan's facade is a lot creepier than Grimmer's is. But my concern is that as we get deeper into the story, and as we learn that possibly Grimmer and Johan are not that different, I'm like, is Tenma going to realize that? And what is Tenma going to do with that information? Because, yeah, Tenma's all about Johan and stopping him from committing these murders. And it's like, well, we're going to complicate all this, right? And so I worry that will Tenma turn on Grimmer when he realizes how similar they are? Or will Grimmer turn on Tenma when he realizes how similar he and Johan are? Or if Grimmer realizes him and Johan are after the same thing, is he going to turn on Tenma and be like, whoa, you don't need to try to kill him anymore. I get where he's coming from. And Tenma's like, you don't understand. He's like flailing everywhere. You know, is Tenma going to become the monster? And it's like, It's very interesting, right? But going back up to this, I am worried that either Grimmer is going to confuse Nina for Anna and make a move, or worse, the secret police are going to confuse Nina for Anna and make a move against her and Dieter, thinking that it's Johan, but it's not. So that is my big concern with her character being in Prague, especially being in an area where Johan is cross-dressing. She has no clue. She has no clue that's happening. She probably is like, I would hope she'd start piecing two and two together, be like, well, they're saying I'm like my brother, but as a woman, so is my brother cross-dressing? And maybe she's going to figure that out. Maybe she's going to put two and two together and then tell Grimmer and Tenma if she meets up with them, being like, look at this. I'm like, maybe, but we don't know. So yeah, but she's in Prague. I like just, again, the mannerisms of her and Johan being so different, right? And her just feeling, Johan feels so, again, what's so fascinating is Nina is clearly uncomfortable there in Prague. She's uncomfortable there. She doesn't like the fact that they're looking at her. She doesn't feel at ease there. She's getting all these memories are getting brought up that she's trying to try to figure out what they mean, that she has repressed through trauma. She's very uneasy there. Johan, we don't know how uneasy Johan is in Prague. We've seen him go back to the apartment and he seemed very calm, but Johan's very good at projecting an aura of calm, even if he is not calm. So, does that mean anything? Is Johan as nervous as she is? We just don't get to see that. I don't know. Him smiling cheesily into the mirror, I don't have the manga volume to know if that's an anime-only edition or what, but go past the OP here. I am glad that we get the stairs, the wine. We're getting these sketches that I'm sure we'll get to. A lot of this and then something about a rooftop. A lot of this we're going back to, so I'm really excited about it, let me tell you. But yeah, so the episode being called The Door to Nightmares. The Door to Nightmares. It's funny because a lot of this episode, there's a lot of doors. We have Grimmer kicking back open the door of the restaurant to go talk about what he remembers about the nephew, Adolf. We have the door to the bar itself that's now an apartment, the door to the apartment room where she grew up to itself. Lots of doors being opened, some of them not good, bringing on good things, but I just love that Grimmer and Tenma show up in their matching boyfriend outfits. They both have like matching duffel bags, matching clothes, which I think is Grimmer wearing some of Tenma's clothes. How'd he find jeans that tall? You know, maybe Grimmer had a pair stashed in his duffel bag because he's not wearing his khakis anymore. But yeah, like they look like boyfriends, just matching clothes, showing up in their duffel bags. I ship it, which makes me concerned about the future. But I ship Grimmer and Tenma for sure. It's like the only ship I have right now, so I'm going to cling onto it for dear life. But yeah, so the idea that the secret police have already been there and they've moved Sook out of the area, which is concerning, right? It's really concerning. I like that Grimmer sticks to his guns, though, throughout all of this. It's frustrating, but Grimmer doesn't trust Tenma completely, and I don't blame him. Because as much as I love Tenma, as much as I love our Dr. Tenma, he is a little bit emotionally compromised. And the moment that Johan gets mentioned, Tenma gets like into assault mode, ready to go. And Grimmer, who doesn't know Johan, all he knows is what he's heard from the tape and what he's looking for information-wise. It makes sense Grimmer doesn't trust Tenma with the location of the tape because it's like, I literally just met you. You seem to be a little bit unstable emotionally about this whole thing. I don't know if I want to tell you about the tape. Because Tenma would probably go after it and lure the secret police there. And Grimmer's like, that's not my MO. And plus, it's like their one hostage piece of evidence they can use to secure Sook back. So he's not just going to let Tenma know about it willy-nilly. But of course, Sook has been transferred to another hospital. Of course he has been. And they're like, who's after them? And I like that Grimmer, he smiles as he says, I don't know who's after the tape, but probably the Chekhov police. Who knows what else for? Just figure it out, right? He's like, that's why I came here to Prague, to figure all this out. And that's when they run into, so there's a roster, technical terms alongside a roster in the tape. And Grimmer said he didn't look at the roster. He only listened to the tape. And then they had to get on their way. Now, I'm assuming the roster tells who all the residents were inside Kinderheim 511. And maybe that would be something important to document and know who's on the list. But I feel like that roster is going to come back, right? And then, of course, as soon as he says Johan, Tenma gets instantly, like, on the trail ready to go. Grimmer doesn't seem so concerned with Johan. He just wants to make sure that the contents of the tape and of Kinderheim 511 aren't repeated. That's what he was worried about with Petrov. That's what he's worried about with the contents of this and the Chekhov police. He doesn't want them to be doing, he doesn't want them to pick up what he thought Petrov was doing. So I like Grimmer's motivation. I like Grimmer being like, I want to save Sook because it's my problem, he's in this mess. But I also want to protect all the future kids. Whereas Tenma is just after Johan. So it's like, it's interesting to see how their interests are different, right? This series makes you never want to get into a car again. Tell you that. Makes you never want to take an Uber because you're constantly worried that the secret police are going to be interrogating you. And Grimmer is trying to keep Tenma out of this. Grimmer's kind of like, you really don't have any involvement in this. And Tenma's like, did you not see I've been wanted for murder the last 10 years? Do you not see how I'm involved actually? So he's like, no, this is a problem. So yeah, I do like that Grimmer is trying to protect him. But it's like, Tenma is stubborn as all get out. He's not going to stop until he finds Johan again. And then we go. I feel like the restaurant we've been in has been one we've been at before. But I guess not. I was really worried for the restaurant scene. Because it's the big shot of the Czechoslovakian police. It's an empty restaurant. It's high profile, but also if you've watched any mafia series or mob movie, you know that just because there's those big windows there does not mean they can't take them out if they want to. Although I guess it might be a little bit of security to think, oh, well, there's big windows where people can see if we're offed in the middle of this conversation. I also love the idea of the moth to the window, like a moth to a flame, like the moth trying to gather information. That's very curious, right? And I also love the formation of the triangle where you have the one Czechoslovakian police guy and then you have the two on either side talking to him. And so he asks them, he wants to know, he's like, there's a big misunderstanding, which there is. There is. And what I love about this dinner scene is that we have painted the Czechoslovakian police as being the bad guys since Zeman, right? Ever since Zeman showed up, we're like, oh, they're the antagonists. But the reality is, as Sook points out, Zeman was corrupt anyway. He was working with a crime syndicate who was not necessarily connected with the police, and the other guys were covering it up. So, yes, there is corruption within the police department, but this guy, who's the top brass, is like, we're not a group of killers. Yes, we are doing business negotiations, but we are not all as corrupt as Zeman. Now, whether we believe that or not, that's to play. But I think above all, what this episode shows is that despite antagonism, despite, what side they're working on, quote unquote, they are all human. He has a human response to his nephew being brought up. And I think that Grimmer, God, he was just MVP of this episode. Tenma lets his emotions get way ahead of him. And Tenma is not someone who's been a member of Kinderheim. He's not someone... Tenma's only connection to this is through Johan. And it's because Johan's kind of messed up his life. But for Grimmer, this kind of gets a little bit deeper than just Johan. It's about Kinderheim. It's about the system. It's about the setup. It's about what was going on before Johan, what led up to Johan. It is very intriguing to see this top brass of the Czechoslovakian police have this emotional response to his nephew. Like, we don't know if the nephew's dead. We don't know if the nephew got out of Kinderheim and had to be killed later. We don't know. I would like to think that either the nephew died there in Kinderheim as a child, but he talks about the 1960s, so that was around the time that Grimmer was there, so it was way before Johan. So my theory is that the nephew got out of Kinderheim and then died later on, and the uncle was unable to stop it. So the Reinhardt, I feel like Reinhardt, we've heard that name before, and I feel like somebody in the comments is going to be like, Adolf Reinhardt was so-and-so, you should know them. And I'm like, it's going to be one of those scenarios where I should know who they are, but I don't remember because we have so many characters in this show. So I'm sure somebody will point it out. But regardless, I do think it's interesting that the uncle has that reaction. And I feel because Grimmer's from Kinderheim, that's the only reason they let them out alive. Is because he can relate to his nephew and because he tells him that story. I also like that Grimmer's like, I just want to know where Sook is. I just want to rescue Sook, then be on my way. Thank you very much. And so, honestly though, they haven't technically killed anybody. It's been Johan that's killed everybody. And Grimmer. Johan and Grimmer have been the murderers in all of this. Right? But I like the idea that we do get established some things. We do know now that the air is cleared that Anna is not connected to the police. So we've determined that because Grimmer thought they were all working with the Czechoslovakian police, and he's like, no, we want to know who Anna is too, right? That there is a context that Anna is not with the police. And then Grimmer has made this deal. He doesn't want to call it a deal. He's just made this proposition that he'll let the chief hear the tapes for personal reasons, but not for the deal. So the German man that made the deal for the tapes, right? Are we thinking that that's Wolf? Are we thinking it's Baby? Are we thinking it's Johan? A part of me at first thought it was Johan. And then when they weren't able to secure the tapes from Petrov, Johan was like, well, fine. If you guys can't get the job done, I'll come and do it myself. And that's when he confronted Petrov, and Petrov wouldn't tell him about the tapes, so he shot them and left. That's what I think has happened. Either it was Johan that wanted the tape to begin with from the Czechoslovakian police because they wanted to find that information out about themselves. And so what you could say is that Johan might have gotten with Schubert to get the money to pay the police in Prague to get the tape and documents so that he in turn could find out about himself, like in this big triangular fashion, kind of like our table setting. But he'd gotten this part, he'd gotten Schubert, gotten the money, but the police were the holdup. He couldn't find the tape. And so Johan was like, fine, I'll just go and get it myself. if you guys can't do the job right, I'll just go get the tape myself and be done with it. And then he's run into Sook and Grimmer and everything else and realized how it's been complicated. Either it's this scenario or it's Baby and another group wanting the tape, and Johan found out about it and went to Prague to beat them to the punch. Seems to be the case, right? Seems to be the case. Okay. Because Johan also wanted the group that was with Lunge at the bar, he wanted them to get a copy of the book as well that was in the library. So, interesting. I'm very curious. We're going to talk about the book and the author of that book and the fact that there was a copy in the library that Johan lit on fire, but there was also another copy somewhere else, right? And so Grimmer asks him about the blonde girl, and Tim is like, blonde girl, which could literally mean anybody. I'm hoping that eventually Grimmer finds out that Anna and Nina are different people, that that's not a point of confusion. I hope that's not the case. And so the one guy with the police says, we want to have the documents and the tape in exchange for Sook. And the thing about it is, Grimmer says he doesn't know where they are. Does Grimmer know where they are, or was that all left to Sook? And Sook left it with his mom and then didn't tell anybody. But Grimmer did say later he'd get the tape, so I guess he does know where it's at. And then Grimmer's whole mission is just to not have Kinderheim repeated, right? So we have Tenma. Tenma wants to destroy Johan and thinks that that will solve the problem. If we destroy the monster, we'll solve the problem. But I think Grimmer is kind of on to the bigger picture, and that's we need to stop the system. We need to stop the system that created Johan. That's what we need to stop. And Tenma hears him say this, but I feel like at some point Tenma and Grimmer need to have a conversation where Johan's not the problem. It's the system that created Johan that's the problem. So stopping Johan, if Kinderheim's facilities and practices keep getting done, then there's going to be another monster created. It's not just going to be Johan, right? It'll be somebody else. So Grimmer's like, we just need to stop the entire system so that we don't have more Johans in the future. And Tenma just kind of looks over to Grimmer like, what? Like he hadn't thought that far ahead, right? And I agree more with Grimmer. I'm like, yeah, stopping Johan may be a band-aid, but it's not going to be the thing that like cauterizes the wound, right? And then I like that the uncle's like, well, that's not what we're here to negotiate. And he's like, how old are you? So he says 30 years ago I was 14. So he's 44. So Grimmer is 44. So I could see that. He looks 40. He looks like he's in 40s. I could see it. And then Tenma, we think, is in his late 20s. Late 20s. Early 30s. Do we agree on that? I think so. I mean, by all BL standards, as far as age gap goes, this is fine. This is like a 1990s BL series. I mean, this age gap is totally fine. I'm all here for it. I'm old enough that I would get with Grimmer if Grimmer existed in real life. I'd be like, let's go. Maybe, you know, keep him with the orange juice. And so then they go out. He has the picture of the nephew as a kid, and that's all he has is this crumpled up photo. So again, I think the kid is dead now. And he's like, if you agree to his demands, we'll get the tape back and he'll release Sook. And then there's this moth, and he's about to get in when he remembers Coco. And he remembers what happened. For Grimmer, it's so interesting. Like back in the episodes with Petrov, Grimmer would like remember something and then run back to the hotel. And it was kind of like, you're being very dramatic, Grimmer. But now it's like, no, his memory is so messed up that it just, one thing just hits it. And it's like, oh. And it's like, did he smell Coco? Did he think of Coco? He was trying to think about what they could do to remember each other. And he runs back in and he said, we had Coco once a week. And he would look forward to the weekly Coco ration. And when I had a fever, he gave me his own Coco, even though he loved it so much. And it's like Grimmer's a 44-year-old man, but is freaking out having these realizations of things he remembered as like an 8 or 9-year-old kid. Like just whatever Kinderheim has done to these individuals, it has messed them up. It has ruined their memory. It has completely stripped them of their identities. And it's terrifying because he talks about being in these schools, and these schools made them forget their names, made them forget who they were. So they tried to like remember about each other to hold on and retain some sense of identity, which is terrifying, right? And it's so heartbreaking to see Grimmer like recount this information. He's like, I wanted to do something to repay him, and he said to remember him. And that would be, he's like, it was popular among us. We talked about ourselves to our friends. With the strange classes we attended, that's why we wanted to remember who our friends were. So that he's like, he loved to draw pictures. He loved insects. He didn't like to collect insects because he had to kill them, and he didn't like that. Like, that was so heartbreaking. He's talking about the kid. He's like, that kid didn't want to kill things, but he liked bugs. And then he likely went on to kill people, which is so heartbreaking and tragic. But just Grimmer going on this spiel, the most fun he had was when he was with the forest with his parents. He caught lots of butterflies. And so it's the butterfly, the moth on the door made him remember. Seeing the moth on the door. He released all the butterflies from the bug cage on his way home. Like, just talking about, he's like, his dream was to become an entomologist. His name was Adolf Reinhardt. And it's just the idea that this kid was a child who didn't want to hurt anybody and had such a kind soul. And just without us even knowing exactly what he did, we know that he's not this, that he probably became a killer, right? Adolf Reinhardt. Like, the question is, like, what? I'm like, did he become Roberto or something? Did he become Roberto and become a killer? That would be messed up. That would be messed up, right? If that was the case. I don't know what to think. But the moment we cut back to the man in the police, and he has tears in his eyes, like he knows that's exactly who his nephew was. And the fact that Grimmer just gave him this account of his nephew. And that's probably all he has to remember him by. And it's so beautiful and heartbreaking because it's like not only his name that's remembered, but things about him. Because that's like the one thing that people get stripped from, as we learn in the story. They're only left with their name and not anything else about them. But Grimmer remembered things about him and could tell his uncle that. You know what? He kind of looks like him. If Roberto ends up being Adolf Reinhardt and Roberto was the name that was given to him to like replace it, I mean, the ages would match up. If he was in his 40s, about the same age as Grimmer. Genetics were kinder to Grimmer. But it would make sense. Wouldn't that be a twist? That Roberto was the kid with the cocoa. That would be messed up. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that would be insane. I would scream. He's like, that was my nephew. That just, Grimmer breaks my heart because he's trying to do good. Grimmer is trying to stop the system. And maybe, what I was saying at the beginning of the episode, maybe Johan's trying to do the same. Johan's trying to protect the children through this act he's trying to pass. This legislation he's trying to pass is trying to protect the children. So maybe he is trying to erase the system and keep it from happening again. Now, the one thing that, complicates all this is that Johan has killed all these people, some of which were innocent civilians, like the foster parents that were not tied to Kinderheim. So that complicates things, right? But it almost seems like Johan and Grimmer are in their own ways trying to keep Kinderheim from ever happening again. But then I don't know, because Johan is kind of indoctrinating the kids too. So I feel like I'm maybe more on board with Grimmer than Johan, but I want to know more about Johan and why he's doing the things that he's doing. I want more. Like, Grimmer has made his MO very clear. Grimmer has come out and said exactly what his mission is. And I'm like, cool, great, we know it. I want to know from Johan what his mission is. And we have only gotten bits and pieces from other people and what they speculate, but we've not really gotten that much from Johan other than he wants to create the legislation for the Children's Rights Act. But that's been pretty much it. So I just want to know more. Meanwhile, we do get to see this image of Nina as a little girl saying, "Welcome back." And he says, "Welcome back." And then we see the wine glass breaking. We see this man saying, don't hide things from him. And okay, I'm assuming the man with the glasses, the purple eyes that looks freaky as fudge is the man they're talking about, the man in the Rose Mansion, right? I'm assuming that's him because we see roses in the image, like he's taking the kids away. I'm assuming this creepy ass mofo is the man that we're talking about, because then we see a door, and we see the door, but the door looks like it's a little bit different than the one that she's seeing, because then we see roses, and we see someone being cut or shot, one of the two, like someone being cut as they're running away, and he says people, as he's reaching for them, can become anything. Oh, and the OP, when the person in the darkness reaches for them. That's in the OP. Oh my God. I've been thinking it was Tenma this whole time. No, it's this guy. It's this guy, right? He's the man in the Rose Mansion where he says the lines, people can become anything. Which is true. They can become monsters. They can become heroes. They can do whatever. So is it Nina and Johan getting brainwashed? What? What is going on? They can become anything. Yeah, it's the same guy. And then we see they're saying cheers with the wine. And now we see this woman who is not Nina. It is clearly their mom, right? She looks like Nina, but her nose is a little bit different. She has a more like Romanized nose. So is the man with the Rose Mansion their dad? Because yeah, and then we see the monster eating. Welcome back. Welcome back. And it's the three frogs. Welcome back. And we see her. Yeah. So we briefly saw, yeah, the nose of the mom is a little bit more like Romanized, like tilted, slanted like that. It's not like hers and Johan's. Is the man with the Rose Mansion that's elegant, is he their father? And is he the one that possibly is like one of the heads of Kinderheim? It seems like what he was doing was possibly the man with the Czechoslovakian police that possibly has connections to Kinderheim. Is he the one that is the author of the book, gave it to the kids as a tool of brainwashing? Maybe. And then maybe he fostered the idea of the monster. I don't know. And she's like, I know this place. I know it all, but I'm scared. And the animation does a really good job of like making the angles and everything seem so distant and far away. And she's like, I'm scared, but I want to know why. I like that Nina's like, I'm scared, but I want to know answers. I want to know the truth of what's going on. Why is this happening? I don't know. I would like to believe that maybe the man with the Rose Mansion. Okay, the man with the Rose Mansion. Okay, we're going to get to him. Which would kind of tie in Carl and Johan as well, because you have Schubert, who was a rich man that, you know, married a wealthy woman from Czechoslovakia, and then they had Carl. And then if Johan ended up being the same path where his father was a wealthy man who married his mom and she didn't make it outside the border, I don't know. But we'll get to him, the man in the Rose Mansion. But I give Nina props. I feel for her because she's trying to figure out what's going on. Like, she's trying to learn from her past, things that she's forgotten. Meanwhile, Grimmer's just sitting there eating donuts. He's just like, hey, what's up, Tenma? And Tenma's like, look, I thought things over. And he's like, the tapes and everything don't have anything to do with you. Grimmer's like, you don't need to do anything with the tapes. And he's like, well, actually, and he's like, we don't have time to talk. They're here to negotiate. So meanwhile, he comes there asking about the tapes. And I like that Grimmer says, look, I'm not going to do this business deal. He's like, I'm not doing a deal with you that's going to result in this information creating another Kinderheim. Now, if you want to call off the deal and see the tapes for yourself, you probably should, so you understand what your nephew is going through. I'm happy to personally show them to you, but I don't want them to be part of a business deal. I like that. I respect Grimmer. And then Tim has to come in being like, we gotta stop Johan. And I'm like, damn it, Tenma. Let Grimmer get this shit done so we can save Sook. Then we'll worry about Johan. But yeah, Tenma is all about making sure that someone could be... Tenma's like, someone could be killed because of that tape. We don't have time to mess around. He's like, it was the person who wants the tape the most. Tenma is all about making Johan out to be the thing we should all be afraid of. Grimmer's just like, okay, well, Dr. Tenma, okay, if you feel so strongly about this. Again, I don't feel like Grimmer feels as conflicted or scared of Johan as Tenma is. Because Tenma has a lot of trauma from Johan. I don't feel like Grimmer shares in the same feelings about it as he does. Just saying. And so he says all he said from his friend. And so they go over everything. And they're like, I don't know. What did you people do 15 years ago? And Grimmer looks so sad there. Like, Grimmer wants to know, too. What have you guys been doing? Like, he knows what's happened to Kinderheim, but what all went down with Johan? He's like, there was a family living near Seadock Bridge in the Mikhalska district, and they were taken away by the secret police. And after taking him away from the building with the 3 frogs on a signboard, what did you do to Johan? So, we finally caught up with what Tenma has found out, and that is the fact that Johan was taken by the police and ended up in Kinderheim. But the thing about it is, he ended up in Kinderheim, but along the way, him and Nina and Johan escaped the border. And then he was sent to Kinderheim and Nina was sent elsewhere. So there are gaps in the narrative, right? There's gaps in the narrative that we are not aware of. We know that Nina ended up at a different orphanage than Kinderheim. Johan ended up at Kinderheim, and they both ended up being adopted by the family. We know that by the Lieberts. We know that part. And we know that according to Johan, him and his sister walked for miles and miles. There were dead bodies everywhere, and they came to the border, and that's when they were picked up. But from the moment that Johan got taken away, so we think, and another kid was left behind, so we think, we don't know the gap between them leaving the 3 frogs, or Johan leaving the 3 frogs and Nina staying behind, and them getting to the border. That there's a big gap there that we don't know, and the Czech police is involved, and we don't know exactly to what extent, right? And so then we go back to Nina. Nina climbing the stairs and everything with Dieter, and she thinks of her big brother. She thinks of these stairs. And then she hears the voice in her head where it's saying, big brother. And she looks back. And he's like, what's wrong, Nina? She says, as if being dragged down these stairs, he was taken away. And she's like, my big brother. So Nina is the younger of the 2. So the uncle says at the time he was in a position to receive all the information about the situation, but these 3 frogs and a family being taken away, I don't have any recollection of them. And Tim was like, are you serious? And he's like, look, no. He's like, there was information that I didn't get. He's like, look, just because I was in the secret police doesn't mean I knew everything. We're the secret police. So he's like, there was information that didn't reach me, like the things that man did. I don't know which division he belonged to. So we're building up this character of the man. This man that nobody seems to know. Some secret man in one of the divisions. Nor did I know what command he was under. But whoever this guy, I like that Grimmer leans in, tell me more. Come on, what's going on? And he says, but for some reason he could detain anyone freely without reporting to his superiors. And I wonder what he was doing. Even though he was just a lieutenant, he was given a luxurious mansion as his workplace. Well, that seems suspicious, right? So this man in the Rose Manor was a lieutenant in the secret police. They gave him a nice place to work at. Which, you know what, ties back kind of to Johan and him giving Mueller the nice mansion, being like, look, I'll give you a nice mansion if you shut up. It seems very similar to that, right? He was given a nice mansion as his workplace. He was known as the man of the Red Rose Mansion. And Tim was like, well, who the hell is he? He's like, he was a quiet man with an extremely elegant demeanor. That sounds like somebody we know. Quiet with an elegant demeanor. That sounds like Johan. So is it Johan's dad? He didn't wear a uniform and liked tea and cake. I'm like, of all things to say about him was that he liked tea and cake and didn't wear a uniform. And said his name was Franz Bonaparte. Now, Franz Bonaparte sounds like an alias for sure. Franz Bonaparte. Sounds like it. However, I don't know if that was his real name or not. Probably not. He also had a pen name. He's like, yes, he was the author of a picture book. And then that's when we get into this, where she opens the door, right? I read a picture book in here. And Dieter's like, what the hell's going on? Someone opened a door and came home. A very peculiar picture book. The name, the monster, the bitch without a name, or something like that. Yep. And then Dieter's looking around being like, it doesn't look like anything special. What is this memory? I should have been reading the picture book here when I came in. And yep, we see the woman, who's definitely the mom. And then the roses, seeing that, the person in the car. I'm welcoming myself back home. No, it's your mom. You just, your memories are fuzzy. Well, here's the thing. She talks about welcoming herself back. And part of you would think, oh, well, it's just the mom. She's just imagining herself as the mom because they look very similar. But here's the thing that's kind of weird about that is you have the little girl holding the book. What if, oh my God, hold on. Okay, hear me out though. Wait a minute. So we have, Nina says, why did I welcome myself back? And why did I welcome myself back? And you could say it's the mom, right? But hear me out, okay? Because we've had Johan cross-dress as a woman. What if, and they talked about when the people left, okay, so she's in the car. Nina, that's the thing that was confusing me about the memory, is that Nina shows herself in the car. Well, if the police came and took Johan away, why would she have memories of being in the car? Why would that be? So here's my thing. What if they made Johan as a kid dress as a girl and were passing it off as Nina and Johan's mom having only one child? What if that's the case? What if this memory she has of coming home, seeing the little girl holding the book, what if that's Johan holding the book, just dressed as a little girl? What if that's the case? Because that would make the story that the guy who told Tenma make more sense, because the guy was like, well, I don't know. The woman only had one kid, just had a little kid, had a girl. I don't remember if it was a girl or a boy, but there's only one child. What if there were two, but the secret police or her, the mom, for whatever reason, was dressing both of her twins up like a little girl to try and fool the police by making them think she only had one child? And they did that all the time, but then the police found out and took her and Johan away. What if that was the case? What if that happened? So that would add another twist to this whole identity crisis with Johan. If Johan was dressed up as a little girl for so long until they were found out and then he was sent to Kinderheim, what if the mom, knowing that Kinderheim was for boys, dressed her son up like a girl to try to keep him away from Kinderheim? What if that was it, right? That would add a whole nother layer to Johan's character, a whole nother layer of his identity and the crisis surrounding it. It would make sense why Nina remembers seeing the little girl when she came home. It was Johan just as a boy, just dressed up as a girl. I think that's it. I think that the mom, for whatever reason, whether it was to protect Johan from getting taken away and taken to Kinderheim, whether it was to try to pass off that she only had one child instead of two. For whatever reason, we're going to find out. I think she was dressing both of her twins up as girls, Johan and Nina, and was having them both there disguised. And then it was eventually found out, and Johan was eventually taken to Kinderheim, or something happened at the border where Johan was discovered to be a boy, and they took him away and took her to the other orphanage. Yeah, because even the little kid, I was like, man, Nina was a creepy little kid. As a girl, that could have been Johan. Oh my gosh. So, it says people can become anything. So yeah, you could dress up as a girl. It's fine. Gender constructs are stupid anyway. But I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. I think that at this point, Johan was being dressed up as a girl, and her and Nina were being passed off as one child instead of two, because the mom, for whatever reason, didn't want him to go to Kinderheim or didn't want them finding out. And then it was found out. And that's when, or even if it wasn't found out, when they went to the border, it could have been found out. But somehow Johan got to Kinderheim. There are those gaps there, like the gaps between Johan and Nina leaving Czechoslovakia and getting to the Lieberts. There is some big gaps there, but we've got lots of episodes to find that out. So yeah. Oh my God. So I'm so curious now. I want to know more. So I'm probably gonna have to wait until y'all give me comments to watch episode 48, but I'm really excited now. I hope Sook's okay. I'm glad at least Sook's at a hospital and he's fine, but I'm curious to know what you all thought down below. We'll see if my theories hold water. We'll see what I'm right and what I'm wrong about. I'm sure I'm wrong about a lot of things, and there's probably lots of complications we don't even know about, but this man at the Rose Mansion is creepy as F, and I want to know more about him. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 48 of Monster. Bye.